program.
Hey, thanks, John, and what a great day it is here at the Minnesota Ag Expo. A big crowd again for day two, the final day of the Minnesota Ag Expo. Have a number of guests lined up. Mark Weber is here. He's the director of the Northern Crops Institute. Good friend of all corn and soybean growers in Minnesota. The American Lung Association of Minnesota, Bob Moffitt, is back for his annual visit. Bob, you keep coming back.
Hey, I love coming to Ag Expo. This is a terrific event. Gives me a chance to see all of our friends in the Corn Growers Association and the Soybean Growers Association in one terrific event. It's really a great experience, and we've had a good time talking to people, telling about how the American Lung Association is helping to promote cleaner burning biofuels to make our air cleaner and our lungs healthier.
And also here is Mark Weber. He's the director of the Northern Crops Institute. Mark, I remember last year, Keith Schroeder, the president of the Minnesota Soybean Growers Research and Promotion Council, had you stop by, and we had a great interview, and I'm going, boy, I had no idea there was even a Northern Crops Institute.
Yes, the Northern Crops Institute, we've been around since 1983, and the purpose is to promote the crops that we grow in this four-state region of Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, and Montana. So promoting soybeans has been a big part of our mission, and it's just great to be back here in Mankato to see a lot of old friends and a lot of our partners that we work with as we promote soybeans and corn.
It is ironic, isn't it, Bob, that the American Lung Association helped promote corn and soybeans. Your interest was cleaner air, healthier people. Mark, well, he's trying to help the profitability, but it's amazing what you can do when you get a lot of different groups and organizations working together with farmers.
It really is. You know, Minnesota is a state that has no oil wells at all, and yet we produce more than 1 billion gallons of ethanol every year. We're exporting fuel now. We're a state that has absolutely no fossil fuel resources, and now other states are buying fuel from us. It's a remarkable story, not only for the environment, but also for the economy of Minnesota.
Well, and then you think about it, you mentioned the environment, so sure, we are exporting it, but the air is somewhere else then will be a little bit cleaner.
Oh, absolutely. That's the thing about air pollution. It doesn't respect borders. It comes right across. Wherever the wind blows, that's where the air pollution goes. So if we're sending our cleaner burning biofuels to our friends in North Dakota, South Dakota, and Iowa, that means everyone's air is cleaner, and it really benefits even larger group of people.
I'm trying to think, Bob, how many years ago it was that the corn growers and the soybean growers started partnering up with the American Lung Association of Minnesota. It was back in those early days of renewable fuels, wasn't it?
Absolutely. It's been almost 20 years now that the American Lung Association has been working with corn growers and soybean growers on these fuels. And it's been a terrific partnership, I must say. We've gotten to know each other really well. They understand, the point of view that the American Lung Association is coming from. We understand the point of view that the corn growers have. And together we've decided that working together, we could get much further than either group could do by working apart.
And Mark, what is the major mission of the Northern Crops Institute? You kind of alluded to it, to promote the crops that are grown in this four states. Well, the major crops are corn and soybeans, but there are a lot of others too, aren't there?
A lot of other crops. Obviously, corn and soybeans are big. Our mission, as we promote the crops in this four-state region, how we do that is we bring visitors from throughout the world. To date, we've had visitors from 130 countries. These are customers, they're potential customers. We teach them how to utilize our crops in their food and feed products. So we're not teaching them how to raise the crops, but rather how to utilize our crops in their food and feed products.
I just had a thought, Bob. When Mark's bringing those groups over from other countries, maybe you should be there too and talk a little bit about how they can have cleaner air back home through using renewable fuels.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, you see some of the pictures out of Mexico City, out of India, out of other countries, China in particular. It's really bad. And, they could really benefit from the fuels that we have here.
Well, we'll continue with today's AM Minnesota program. We have a market break coming up. Then we'll continue visiting with Mark, Bob, and I think Matt Brown is going to stop by too. So, John, we'll send it back to you at the studio for the market break. Thank you again, John. Welcome back to the Minnesota Ag Expo over in Mankato. I should have mentioned before the market break The great sponsors of today's AM Minnesota program, including the Craig Keller Insurance Agency in Nerstrand, the Minnesota Corn Growers, Isaacson's Implement in Nerstrand, Wenzel Accounting and Tax Services of Owatonna, American Lung Association of Minnesota, the Goodyear Wabasha Corn and Soybean Growers, Coles Electric in Owatonna, the Reliance Bank in Faribault, Legend Scenes, the Dodge County Corn and Soybean Growers, Kenyon Ag Services, and finally Elkhorn Clean Fuel in Claremont. Bob Moffett is here with the American Lung Association of Minnesota. Bob, did you mention that or notice that last sponsor, Elkhorn Clean Fuels in Claremont? I think they started plate capacity at like 30 million gallons. They were up to 50 or 60. Now they're expanding to 120 million gallons of ethanol a year. Amazing, isn't it?
It's absolutely amazing. I just was reading that news and just thinking, wow, to see how quickly this industry has grown. Really, 25 years ago, the ethanol industry didn't really exist as much in Minnesota. And you look at it today, we're the fourth largest producer of ethanol in the country. We went from nothing to the top 5 in just one generation. It's really remarkable.
What else is really neat, Mark, and this kind of goes along with the mission of Mark Weber and the Northern Crops Institute, but it is adding profitability to local corn growers, and it's money that stays in that community rolling over and over, benefiting everybody rather than sending it to one of the sheiks overseas.
Absolutely. You know, you keep more of your fuel dollar here in Minnesota, and a lot of people don't realize that all those good co-products that come out of ethanol production, such as dried distiller's grain, such as inedible corn oil, this is all coming out and also adding more profit to the bushel. So it's helping Minnesota farmers, it's helping Minnesota's economy, and it's helping Minnesota's environment and health all at the same time.
Well, I'm not sure if anybody has put a value on cleaner air and what impact that has and what it would cost for these people that, you know, had more health issues.
Actually, they have, and they've determined the Minnesota Business Association did a study, and they said that it's saving the state billions of dollars in regulatory actions we don't have to take because we meet all federal air quality standards. If we didn't, say like Chicago, we would have a lot of restrictions on the type of businesses that can open in Minnesota. So clean air means you're open for business. So it's really important for Minnesota to maintain those air quality standards.
Well, let's bring Mark Weber back in with the Northern Crops Institute. And Mark, we've been talking a little bit about promoting corn and soybeans through the use of renewable fuels and cleaner air. You mentioned you bring foreign, maybe importers over here to show them what corn and soybeans can do and the other crops that we grow here in the upper Midwest?
Yeah, absolutely. We teach them how to utilize the crops. The crops in this growing region have some very unique characteristics that's unique to other regions in the world. I want to finish up one more thing, a comment that Bob made in his good work with the American Lung Association. We work closely with the U.S. Grains Council, which is funded by the Minnesota Corn Checkoff, the Barley Checkoff, and the Sorghum Checkoff. It's a national organization. They have offices around the world to promote corn, barley, and sorghum. One of the initiatives that they've taken on is they have formed a task force to promote a more ethanol use in other countries of the world as another way of trying to build even more market share for our corn farmers. So the efforts that the U.S. Grain Council really does complement the good work that Bob and the American Lung Association have been doing.
Well, and it's all about partnering and working together, and the more people, the groups that you represent, the more clout, the more that you can get done.
Absolutely, and partnering up with various partners is what we do. One of our very strong partnerships are both with the Minnesota Corn Research and Promotion Checkoff as well as the Minnesota Soybean Checkoff. Those organizations provide funding to the Northern Crops Institute for some of the market development work that we do. As an example, we are bringing in a group here come this summer in June, a group of about 35 users that use soybeans from Southeast Asia. We'll be teaching them some of the attributes of the soybeans grown in this region and how they can improve the quality of their product. It'll be funded by the Minnesota, North Dakota, and South Dakota Soybean Checkoff program. So here you have three growing states cooperating together to promote soybeans from this northern region of the United States.
Well, it'd be nice, too, if we could get over to China. And granted, they're great customers of ours for soybeans, Bob, but I've seen some of the pictures of the air in China, and let's just say I'm glad I'm living in Minnesota and not somewhere over there. Have you seen some of the indications of how polluted their air is?
Oh, I certainly have. In fact, the Chinese have requested that the U.S. turn off their air quality monitor on top of the embassy because they're embarrassed to see what the air quality is. And you know, if we hadn't passed the Clean Air Act back in the early 70s, we would be looking at problems similar to that. We saw situations in this country and in London and other large capitals around the world where air pollution was getting so bad that the death rate would spike whenever they would have a bad air pollution day. There was an incident in London back in the 50s where thousands of people have died over 3 days when the smog just hung over the city. So air pollution isn't just a nuisance, it is a deadly threat. So we need to do everything we can to turn to cleaner fuels such as ethanol and biodiesel to help clean up our air and keep our wheels turning.
You mentioned the coal products left after we take that kernel of corn and get what is about 2.8 gallons of ethanol out of every bushel. Dry distillers grains, I know most of the plants now recover the carbon dioxide. Some of it goes into refrigeration. Some of it goes into the fizz and the pop we buy. But now they've even started, not that long ago, recovering the corn oil. And that's being used to make biodiesel.
Isn't that remarkable? We're now getting two fuels out of the same bushel of corn. And, you know, this corn oil isn't really suitable for human consumption, but it's perfect for biodiesel. So this is something, a new process that most of the ethanol plants in Minnesota are starting to adopt. And it's just a great way to get more product out of that bushel and really help Minnesota's air and environment and transportation future even more.
Mark, what are some of the other crops that you spend a lot of time on with the Northern Crops Institute? I mean, here in the 4 states you represent, corn, soybeans, what are the other major crops that you are trying to spread the word to possible importing countries overseas?
Well, wheat is a very important crop as we move into northern Minnesota and, of course, into South Dakota and North Dakota and Montana. We have some of the highest quality wheats in the world. Hard red spring, if you will. It has some very unique baking characteristics, ideal for baking breads and cookies and cakes. And so what we do, we will bring flour millers, bakers from parts of the world, and we will bring them to our region, and we will teach them the excellent quality aspects that they can expect from products if they utilize our hard red spring wheat in their portfolio. One of the things about our hard red spring wheat, it has some of the highest quality in the world, but unfortunately it comes at a higher price. So our wheats really have become a blending wheat, if you will. A food processor, a food user tries to buy cheap wheat on the world market, but in order to get it up to the specs that they need to meet that excellent quality, they need to use some of our hard red spring wheat from this tri-state region in their portfolio. And so that's what we do. We teach the value concept, not price, but value. So there is value that they can gain by purchasing hard red spring wheat from this region.
Speaking of value, back to soybeans, I was talking with Keith Schroeder, who's the president of the Minnesota Soybean Research and Promotion Council, and he mentioned that beans grown here in the upper Midwest, many times in just a raw, crude protein, might be a little less than those grown in South America. But he said if you break it down further and look at the actual amino acids, our beans are actually superior to those. But there again, he said we've been using the crude protein since, the 1800 and something. And now when nutritionists nowadays are fine-tuning rations, they are actually looking at the different amino acid balance, and there's where we shine. But he made the comment again, that's the word that we have to get out. So that's kind of what you do. I'll bet you knew that. You probably could have explained it better than I just did.
Well, absolutely. It's an important educational project. When we bring folks here, we're teaching them that it's not the quantity of the protein, but rather the quality. The quality of the protein as measured by the amino acid profile. Through the excellent work that the University of Minnesota has done, through the excellent research that they've done, they've discovered that with livestock has a much better efficiency in converting that feed into to animal weight gain, if you will. So this is one of the important concepts that we teach as we bring users from around the world here and teach them how to utilize our soybeans. They can get more bang for the buck by taking soybeans out of this region. With a higher quality protein, at the end of the day, they'll put on a better weight gain for their livestock.
And Bob, I'd almost like to think that we are the best in the world at raising corn and soybeans. So let's raise it here because we can do it very environmentally friendly. We'll make some renewable fuels and then we'll export some of the corn and soybeans. Maybe they've got some land then that is highly erodible. Well, maybe they don't have to farm that land because we have the comparative advantage of raising it here.
Absolutely. You know, we've got the word America right in our title. So naturally, we're going to be interested in American-made fuels. Fuels where they're made in America every year, renewable. They help Americans. They help us get less dependent on foreign oil. And it really helps out everyone. This isn't something that just helps out the upper Midwest. The biofuels industry really helps out the nation.
And by exporting renewable fuels helps out the world. I wanted to bring Matt Braun in here because we've been talking about promoting the U.S. worldwide. We also have to do a little promoting here. We have to educate the consumers here. And Matt Braun spends a lot of time with the Dakota rice, corn, and soybean growers. He's kind of in charge of our social media.
Yeah, I'm kind of in charge of it. I think I'm the lone bird here, but yeah.
Yeah, we were more than happy to let Matt take that over, but you are reaching a lot of people through Facebook, and a lot of those are the non-farming public that want to talk to a farmer.
Yeah, just by Facebook pages and with Twitter and stuff, you reach so many non-farming public because they've got Twitter and Facebook. A lot of my generation, I'm 39, so it's my age, that does and they want to know where their food comes from. So.
And they also want to know that we're treating our livestock humanely. They want to know that we are taking care of the environment and we're promoting renewable fuels, which means cleaner air. A lot of times maybe they haven't made those connections because there are some in the media that like to portray agriculture, modern intensive agriculture, in a bad light.
Well, yeah, if you post a picture, it makes it. I mean, when you show what our animals and what we're doing on a farm, it makes a difference. People see that and it's like, wow, I mean, that's what you do. Everybody thinks that we're still farming back in the 50s and we're not. Things have changed since then.
Yeah, and we've learned a lot about being environmentally friendly. Well, Bob, you and I were talking here a few minutes ago, 20 years ago, there really wasn't an ethanol industry.
No, there wasn't, and this has all grown very quickly. I'm looking right across the aisle here, and I'm seeing some solar panels. I mean, where were those 10 years ago? Everything is really changing, and in many ways changing for the better. The technology is helping us produce energy and transportation fuels much cleaner than we did before. So really, we've got the opportunity to move forward into a next generation of both agriculture and transportation with cleaner and better environmental stewardship on both counts.
Mark, through the Northern Crops Institute, when you're getting these countries in, are you spreading the word, too, about the value of dried distillers' grains, one of the co-products of the ethanol industry?
Absolutely, and I want to share with you where we have pitched in to help out the dried distillers' grain industry. Canada uses their feed mills up there use dried distillers grains imported from this region. We found out here several years ago, several of their factories were encountering production and quality problems, and they were blaming it on the dried distillers grains. We sent up one of our technical experts. He spent about a week in those factories, and he discovered that it wasn't the quality of the dried distillers grain, but rather the type of equipment, some of the equipment failures. He changed the process flow through those factories, and as a result, the production and quality picked up, and we held on to that market. It would have been very easy to blame the problems on a poor quality product that they were getting, but instead we showed them some of the technical changes, and as a result, they continue to import dried distillers grains today from this region. And so we do a lot of that as we help troubleshoot with industry around the world, and by doing that, we can ensure that not only providing a quality crop and a quality product, we can also provide a level of service that the industry has come to rely on.
Well, I remember when we were getting the ethanol industry growing and the biodiesel, we had some hiccups too. A lot of them were blamed on this new fancy fuel, we found out it wasn't the fuel, it was a crud and the junk that were in some of these tanks. And because it was a biofuel, Bob, it started cleaning out the system.
Absolutely. And, I also remember a case where a group of school buses in Bloomington wouldn't start when it was 30 below, and then the garage manager said, it's got to be that biodiesel stuff. And that went out on the airwaves, and it got onto the wire services, and everyone was blaming biodiesel. Well, we sent in an investigator, and he checked it out, and it turned out to be paraffin. Paraffin inside of the filter.
That's from petroleum.
That's from petroleum. There is no paraffin in biodiesel. So it was bad diesel, not bad biodiesel. Stop those buses.
Well, and Matt, we've been using it on the farm for a number of years. I think last summer up to 10%, and I didn't hear any issues. So through social media, do you get some questions from consumers then about, well, you shouldn't be taking food and making fuel, we should be using that food to feed people? Do you get some of those questions?
Yes, I get a lot of questions, actually, on ethanol and biodiesel. I get so much questions, and you just got to talk to them and say, hey, we have enough acreage and enough thing to be able to do both. We can feed the world and fuel it.
Yeah, because what is it now about last year we had about 15 billion bushels of corn. We used 5 billion bushels, a little over, for ethanol. But the biggest frustration to me, Mark, is that even some grain analysts to this day don't understand that whole bushel of corn doesn't go away when it goes in the front end of an ethanol plant. Bob mentioned the dry distillers grains, the corn oil, the recovered carbon dioxide. Dry distillers grains, we feed that, as you mentioned, to a lot of livestock, and boy, they get great performance with it.
Absolutely, and the byproducts are often underscored, if you will, in the whole value chain. We continue to work with the research community and others to try to develop additional byproducts to try to raise more high-value products, if you will. For example, soybeans, too. You have soy flour, you have isolates, you have concentrates that are used as protein extenders in beverages, in health drinks. These are all higher value products that we can use the basic soybean to start with, and we do this with corn and with all of the crops out there. So there's much more opportunities out there in the future as we develop more of these uses for our crops.
And it's all going to be people continuing to work together. The greatest part about the renewable fuels or some of these new uses, you mentioned it, Mark. Matt and I raise corn and raise soybeans. Matt, we're funding a lot of this research and market development through the checkoff.
Yeah, and we also need the turkey growers, the beef producers. You got to be able to work together, but you got to look at all sides of everything in order to find the equal ground.
Yeah, in order to gain, we all got to be working together on the same page. I think Bob mentioned that a little while ago when we were first getting the renewable fuels industry going.
Oh, absolutely. And we in Minnesota, we have the unique situation where the legislators, the farmers, the environmental community, the lung association, we all work together. This was never a partisan issue. This was one of those few times when both people across the aisle, even Governor Ventura, like biofuels.
Boy, it doesn't happen very often, does it, Mark, when both sides of the aisle can agree on something?
I think that's always been known in agriculture. Agriculture has stuck together. It's a nonpartisan. I think you find that in Congress, too. The Ag Committee is very much a nonpartisan issue, the most nonpartisan of all the Ag Committees, or of all of the committees in Washington. And it's true throughout the land. And working very closely with the soybean and corn and wheat growers and other groups, we're able to find more opportunities. And we really have an exciting future in agriculture, I think.
Well, Mankato has a group that's coming together to promote agriculture, like what's the Silicon Valley of California. Well, this is a Silicon Valley of agriculture. And Mark, it didn't make a lot of sense to me until I met you last year. We really do have a tremendous potential in addition to what we already have here in the upper Midwest.
Well, when you look at the rest of the world, and as middle incomes continue to rise, people demand a better diet, and a better diet would mean more protein. So those are tremendous opportunities for our crops in this region to feed the rest of the world. And I think we have more exciting times ahead of us, and we're looking forward to a great future.
And Matt and I are too, raising corn and soybeans, but we got to all be working together because you know what? We got to be able to generate enough to pay our expenses and maybe have a little bit to live yet, don't we?
Yeah, and I mean, you got to be able to look at every side of the envelope, and one may not work, but the other one may not work, and it all work out in the long run.
Yeah, and we have to maybe not be so worried about short term. We have to be looking at long term, right? Right, Bob?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we need to be looking to the future. And, I really appreciate what Matt does on social media, getting out and reaching the crowd, using new communications tools. Matt and I retweet each other more than anyone else. So we're always talking back and forth on Twitter. So it's a lot of fun. And it's really great to see him engaging the non-farm community because there is a lot of education that needs to be done for people to understand the good work that we're doing in the state of Minnesota.
And there's certain things that the American Lung Association of Minnesota can do, certain things that the Northern Crops Institute can do, but yet it seems like the consumer wants to connect directly with a farmer, Matt.
Yeah, and that's where the farmers markets and people like that. I've had more people say, hey, we want to go straight to the farmer. And I'm like, well, that's what you got social media. You're always welcome to come out to the farms. We'll show you what we do. We can let you ride in a tractor. We can show you what we're doing.
Yeah, Matt's one of these that obstructs traffic up in the southern metro, but he takes a great big tractor into a grocery store parking lot, right?
Yeah, I did that in Cub Foods a couple of years ago. We parked it there, and we talked to the consumer, and it just worked out great.
So what a great way, Bob, to talk about all these benefits, make a commotion at a grocery store. What do you think that did for the kids dragging their mom and dads over to see this big tractor?
Well, I think it may have had an impact because, a big grocery store chain up in St. Cloud, Coburn's, just made the decision a few years back to put ethanol in all of its pumps, and that has really been a big difference. We did 11 events at Coburn's last summer, so I even went up to North Dakota to do one.
And unfortunately, there's so much misinformation out there. So we need more people like Matt to get the word out. Farmers are still a trusted source, and the American people still trust the word of a farmer. And as we engage more farmers to tell the story, we can make a huge difference. And I want to compliment Matt on his work in doing that.
Well, thanks, Mark, for stopping by for AM Minnesota today.
You're welcome, and it's great to be here.
And Matt, thank you for everything you do.
Yes, thank you.
And Bob, thank you to the American Lung Association, the great partnership, and let's keep it going.
Jerry, we'll see you next year.
Hey, John.